Hello and welcome to today's Digital Dealer webinar. My name is Maria Brickell and I will be your host today on the webinar. Our topic is Marketing Metrics 101, the metrics that matter and how to measure them. Our speaker today is Vicki Gibbs. She's a GM for Albright Digital. The webinar audio today will be broadcasted through your computer speakers. If you're having any trouble, please click that telephone icon and you will get the call-in information. All lines will be muted by the organizer throughout the presentation. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to use the question box in your GoToWebinar task box. Our moderator today is Maureen Condon. She's the editor for Dealer Communications, Dealer, and Digital Dealer magazine. Maureen?
Thank you, Maria. I'd like to introduce our speaker. It's Vicki Gibbs. She's the GM for Albright Digital, which helps auto dealers drive more sales from digital. Vicki brings more than 20 years of experience in technology, including 12 years with e-commerce, analytics, mobile, and internet marketing. Prior to launching Albright Digital in 2011, Gibbs worked for Viacom, where she led a variety of initiatives in mobile, analytics, and video across various brands, including MTV, Nick, and Comedy Central. Before Viacom, she worked in a variety of high-tech companies, including Art.com and Motricity, where she led teams marketing and client services. She started her career at Mitsubishi, where she worked as a design engineer and received FOA patents. Gibbs received her BSc in electrical engineering from Duke University and her MBA as a Dean Scholar from the Keenan Flagler Business School at UNC Chapel Hill. Vicki, would you like to begin?
Thanks, Maureen, and welcome everyone to the webinar. I am Vicki Gibbs, and I am, as Maureen said, the General Manager of Albright Digital, and I'm here to talk to you about marketing metrics. One of the things that is a top priority for us as a company is delivering proven results for our clients. And with that, we get into a lot of discussions with our customers about metrics and measuring success. And how I came up with the idea for this session really started there. So when we were launching a new product last year, I was having many conversations with different customers, and I realized that there are some unique things about the auto industry that make measuring marketing more challenging. So measuring marketing across the board across all industries is difficult, but auto is special in some ways. First of all, auto dealers spend a lot of money on marketing each month across a variety of programs. And for this reason, understanding what's working and what isn't is even more important because you're looking to turn a positive return on investment. Second, you spend all of those marketing dollars across a lot of different vendors, and that introduces another challenge. Those vendors each deliver you reports. So one, you have a lot of different reports to sift through. I'm sure some of y'all have 10, 20, maybe even more reports that you're dealing with on a monthly basis. And secondly, in many cases, those reports may be talking about the same metrics, but defining them slightly differently and things like that. So then you have conflicting information, you have a lot of information to sift through, and it's really hard to figure out what's working and what isn't. So out of those challenges is why I came up with this session. And really what we're looking to do today is to focus on the basics of marketing metrics and how to measure those. So let's jump right in. So when I look to manage marketing and marketing budgets, one of the things that I always remember is that you can't manage what you can't measure. So whatever you can't, if you can't measure it, then you can't understand what's successful, and you can't understand really where to invest more, where to invest less. So as you're spending all of your money on your marketing programs throughout the month, you're spending on TV and radio, you're spending on standard digital marketing like SEO and SEM, you're spending money on social, on review management systems, what have you. And when you look at the end of the month on your sales and you try to figure out what's really driving that, that's where your challenge is. After this session, you should be able to at least identify what metrics you need to measure to figure out what of those programs are working and not. We're going to cover three main topics here today. First, we're going to look at how to set expectations for various marketing programs. So understanding what is a reasonable expectation for each of those marketing programs is very important. Marketing programs can be put into two different major buckets in branding and direct response. And we're going to talk about what marketing programs go in each and how that impacts what expectations you have for those. Secondly, we're going to talk about the very specific metrics that you need to measure for each channel to see what's successful and not. And finally, we're going to talk about some tactics for improving those marketing programs and driving additional sales. I'm not going to spend as much time today on that third topic. I'm going to spend more time on the first two. I'm going to have some more time at my session at the Digital Dealer Conference. We're going into more case study information, so I would encourage you to attend that to get some additional tactics and problem solution results. So the first thing that we'll look at is classifying marketing programs. So when you look at the classification, marketing programs can be put into two different buckets, branding and direct response. So with your branding and direct response programs, and Maria, I have to interrupt briefly. I'm having a hard time pushing forward the presentation, so if you could forward it for me, that's great.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. So all of our marketing programs can be put into two big buckets, branding and direct response. One of the reasons we do this is that they both work together very well to drive sales for your overall business. But there's different purposes for each. And so without understanding what purpose each one of them is supposed to do, then it's hard to understand what metrics to measure. In order to understand how these actually relate to driving sales for you, let's walk through a quick example. So we're going to walk through an example of someone walking through the purchase process. So we're going to look at Harry here for a second. Harry, he needs to gain a little weight. He's a little skinny, but besides that, he has a truck that he's had for 3 years, and it's got about 50,000 miles on it. And Harry is not even thinking about buying a new car right now. He is basically happy with where he is. But in his everyday life, Harry interacts with lots of different marketing around him. He watches TV, he sees TV commercials, he's listening to the radio on the way to work. When he actually bought his truck, he actually became a Facebook friend and a Twitter follower with the dealership where he bought it. So as he goes onto Facebook, he sees an article about a new truck that's coming out next year. He reads that article. He sees different information about safety features in his Twitter feed. All of those pieces of information are interacting with him each day. And what that's doing is it's leaving an impression of the dealership with Harry, even though he's not in that purchase process. Now, as we go 2 years down the road, we have Harry, and he is thinking, okay, my truck's 5 years old. It's getting towards the end of the year. I know that there may be good specials with them trying to get rid of cars from this year, so maybe I should think about getting a new truck. So what Harry does is he actually starts to build his consideration set, and he starts to do some research, his initial car research, his initial dealership research. And what he does there is he's going to his auto portal sites, he's going to review sites, he's going to different areas where he's just collecting information about different vehicles he may be interested in and different dealerships. Again, this is an opportunity for your dealership to leave an impression on Harry even though he's not actively purchasing. Now we go one step further, and we are in his sort of the last mile, where it's November, it's the end of the year, and he's ready to buy. He is basically paying attention to those TV commercials, looking at sort of what's going on with regard to pricing promotions, any other type of promotions, those sorts of things. He has it narrowed down to what vehicle he wants, so he goes to Google, he searches for specific vehicles, he clicks through to different dealership websites, does research there. He's looking at, eBay, Craigslist for additional information on vehicles, and so on and so forth. And all of this is around driving to that final purchase. In making that final purchase, what Harry's going to do out of all of this information is he's going to have built a consideration set of dealerships, and he's going to cull that down to 2 or 3. And in those 2 to 3, he is going to submit leads, and then he's going to go visit those dealerships. So as you can see here, you have all of these marketing channels that have influenced Harry throughout, 2+ years. And each of them is driving to enable Harry to select you as a dealership in that final 2 to 3. Then once he submits a lead and comes in, it's up to your salespeople to sell him. But the question that we're going to talk about today is how do we make sure that we're doing everything from a marketing perspective to influence Harry to get into that final 2 to 3. So first thing we need to do is we need to classify those different marketing programs. You probably have at any point in time 20+ marketing programs that you have out there. So why do you need to think about whether one's branding or direct response and all of that sort of thing? The first thing is that by defining each of your programs as branding or direct response, you can set up some general goals for each program. And in setting a goal, that's the first step towards being able to measure a program to see if it's successful. Secondly, in order to have a successful overall marketing program, you have to balance your investment in both branding and direct response. You need both. They work together as we just saw. But based on where you're located, based on how competitive the market is around you, based on all of those sorts of things, you're going to want to balance how you invest in branding versus direct response. But you have to understand what they are in order to balance that investment. Thirdly, a branding program's success is measured very differently than a direct response program, and we're going to go into that in a second. But what happens if you don't define them correctly is that you may be actually trying to use metrics for a direct response program measurement for a branding program, and if you do that, you're not going to be able to figure out if something is successful or not. And overall, what you're trying to do is figure out what's working and then create an overall marketing program strategy that's effective for you, that you can optimize and generate more sales over time. And it all starts with this first classification. So going to the next slide, we can look at branding programs and what sort of expectations we have with them. The first thing to understand about branding programs is that when you invest in these, they are a longer-term impact. This is not something that you invest in a branding program and you're going to see resulting sales in necessarily 10 days. And one of the reasons for that is this is an influencer of a decision. It's not trying to drive a particular purchase. So this is where you are trying to influence a consumer to consider you and to put you in that consideration set, and you are trying to make an impression on them. The overall goal is to get a greater share of voice than your competition. The other thing that's a little bit different here is that your target market is anyone within your demographic who could purchase a car at some point in the future. So you have a very broad basis for these programs. They're not necessarily highly targeted, but you're looking at people that you want to make an impression on, a very positive impression. And the other key here is that you have an opportunity to create awareness for your dealership as well as differentiation. So this is the chance within your branding programs to establish really how you are different, how you are better than the other dealerships, so that this individual that you're talking to through your marketing is going to put you in the consideration set as they look to buy a vehicle into the future. So going to the next slide, we can look at sort of general measurement for branding programs. So again, the goal of these programs in branding is to be top of mind for your consumer once they reach that purchase decision. You really want to be able to be placed in that consideration set because you're never going to be selected unless you're actually in the consideration set to begin with. Now, how you measure this, another thing that's important about branding is that you can't measure it in a vacuum. You have to understand the context of where you are in relation to your competition. So when you look at things like your TV, your social media, SEO, what you're doing is important, but in order to measure your success, you have to consider what your competition is doing at the same time and how you compare. Otherwise, you're not going to get a good view of what your share of voice is or what your influence is to your customers. The other thing that you have to measure is you need to measure the demographic you care about, because There may be people out there that you are not necessarily targeting. If you have, a brand that is very young oriented, you may not care about an older demographic and where they're located. So make sure that that's incorporated in your measurement. The other key thing from branding is that anything you do on the branding side is going to have a longer term effect. So if you make a change or if you invest more in one area of branding, you're not necessarily going to see an impact in less than 30 days. So being reasonable about the time frame in which you're doing your measurement and evaluation is very important. Let's talk briefly about direct response. So when you look at direct response, the expectations are very different. Here, this is really where you're targeting your market once they are in that purchase decision. So once Harry had decided, yes, I'm going to buy a car, now I want to look for the best deals and the best people to work with and the best service plans, etc., that is when you want to attack your user with these direct response programs. This is where you can get a short-term impact. You can actually spend money, focus marketing efforts, and you should see a result within a less than 30-day time frame, sometimes even shorter. And what you are really trying to do is to push people to purchase from you and to put you in those 2 to 3 dealers that they are going to submit leads for, go visit and test drive and make that decision, because ultimately that's what you want to do. You want them to walk into your dealership and then give you the chance to sell to them. And that's what these programs really do, is that last mile. So on the next slide, measuring success, really, the goal is to get someone to buy, get someone to put you in that last 2 to 3 dealers that they're going to select. When you look at measurement here, direct response programs are a lot easier to measure because you are looking for that cause and effect. Any sort of retail business, auto included, can be measured in 3 basic metrics as it relates to these programs: traffic, average order size, and conversion. Average order size to some degree is more so going to be related to the type of vehicles that you're selling, the OEM brand that you're representing, those sorts of things. Your direct response programs, you're going to be measuring them based on your traffic and based on your conversion. Traffic both into your dealership for appointments as well as traffic online. And so you can measure any of these programs from the traffic to the number of appointments and then to sales. So when you look at online, you can look at that as basically website. You can also look at that as far as your internet leads. And that is really how we can tie it all together. Now if you move to the next slide, what we're really looking to do is, y'all are probably asking, well, which of my programs fall into one of these 2 buckets? And when Maria, if you can click, we'll let them appear and they will kind of come forward there. So what you can see here is where some of these programs fall. I'm going to go through these in details in a second, but as far as our branding programs at a high level, you have things like SEO, organic search. You have your online review sites such as Google+, Yelp, etc. You have social, Twitter, Facebook, those elements. You have your vehicle portals such as AutoTrader, Cars.com, Edmunds. Now there are some of these programs that can fall into both buckets, and I'll go into a little bit more detail later, and those are mainly your TV, radio, and your local online advertising. Then your direct response, those are things like your promo advertising on those portals, your website, any paid SEM that you're doing, and also listing services such as Craigslist and eBay, as well as third-party internet providers. So the next thing that we're going to go into is details around measuring success. So now that we can classify each of those programs, now we have to figure out how do we actually measure them. So with all these reports, with all of this data that you're going through, how do you actually figure out what's working and what's not? And one of the things I'll say here is that as I go through these different examples, if you have particular questions about any programs that I haven't covered, if you want to type that into the questions, you can ask that at the end, and I can give you some insights on those. So first, let's talk about local advertising as it relates to branding. So as I said before, this is it's combo branding and direct response for your local advertising, and we're going to talk about it related to branding first. Your branding goal here is to get a greater share of voice than your competition. This is also your opportunity to really imprint in your customer's mind how you're different and better. So when you look at how do you measure this, there's a couple different ways. One, you can look at, and you can talk generally with your agency about this, or many times your local TV or radio reps, and ask them how what you're spending compares to what your competition is spending. Are you the same? Are you more? Are you less? This is also something that just by watching TV and listening to the radio, you can get probably a pretty good idea of. If you know that your competitor down the road, it seems like you're hearing him on the radio every morning and you're not there, that's something to think about. There's also a matter of where you are advertising, TV, radio, online. That will relate to your demographic and where they are. But what we're measuring here for branding is your share of voice. So are you being heard in more places than your competition, the same or less? And then also, are you able to clearly convey your key point of differentiation? With branding in these channels, you have an opportunity, in many cases, TV and radio, 15, 30, 60 seconds sometimes, to deliver your message as far as why this is, why you're better, why someone should come see you. With online, even for local, you can generally afford to buy enough impressions so that you can have some branding-oriented ads as well as some direct response. So again, you can have those things work together very effectively so that you can create awareness for your brand locally as well as differentiation for why you were different. So again, as far as measuring for branding in this case, you're looking at the amount that you're spending or the amount of penetration frequency you have in these, as well as how well is your message getting across. The next one that we'll go into is looking at your different auto portals. So when you look at these, the ones AutoTrader, Cars.com, Edmunds, to name a few, these cover a lot of different listings for auto dealers. There are standard listings, there are premium listings, and even some in between. So when you look at this, if you go to these sites, these folks like Edmunds, AutoTrader, Cars.com, they are spending a lot of money to drive consumers to their portals, and consumers are going there and they're doing a lot of research. So if someone is going there and they're searching for new Fords, new Kias, Toyotas, what have you, they're going to see a listing of cars within their area that are related to dealers. So when you look to measure how you're doing here, you're going to look at, are your competitors, are they premium, are they standard, what are you? You're going to look at, when you look at those search results, where are you ranking compared to them? And then you're also going to be looking at the amount of traffic that you're getting on those sites. That's specifically how many people are going to your dealer page, how many people are going to your vehicle detail pages, and things like that. Because those are at least people who are seeing your brand there, and so on and so forth. So you can see how that might vary between a basic listing versus a premium listing. You can also look and see, just what the sort of entry is as far as like how you're being presented versus your competition to see how you're doing. So next we'll go through and we're going to look at, I believe social is next. Yep. So social has become a pretty hot topic over the past couple of years. And I think a lot of dealers have been challenged with, one, how much do you spend here, not only money-wise, but also time-wise to manage these channels, and what should I expect out of them? I've heard a number of dealers be frustrated a little bit with Facebook because it doesn't drive direct sales. And one of the reasons is that it truly is a great branding mechanism, but it's not necessarily direct response. So your Facebook posts are not necessarily going to drive direct sales, but when you look at it from a share of voice perspective, if you have a lot of presence and are louder than your competition in that and are providing good content, it can be a key influencer to getting you into that consideration set. So when you look to compare and to measure how you're doing on social, and I'm looking specifically at Facebook and Twitter here, I'm going to go into some of the newer ones in a couple slides, but Facebook and Twitter, they've been around for a while, they have lots of penetration with users. And there are metrics that you can look at to compare you and your competition. For Facebook specifically, you can look at your number of fans. You can look at the reach of your post. And you can also look at the number of comments that users have made and the number of times that they have shared your content. And you need to look at this again in comparison to your competition. Now, one of the things that Facebook did when they launched their new timeline is you can actually see insights for yourself, as well as you can see some limited set of insights for other pages. So that's a great opportunity for you to see how you're doing, but also look at how your competition is doing as well. For Twitter, what you can look at is you can look at the number of followers. You can look at how many people you're reaching with your posts. And then you can also look at the number of times your posts are retweeted or anytime you get comments or direct messages. So both Facebook and Twitter, one of the reasons that I'm pushing to look at comments and retweets and things like that is that it's about having useful content for your consumers. There's also, I think, different schools of thought with getting different fans and followers. You can use contest effectively. You can use content effectively. And there's two schools of thought as far as, do you just need as many as possible, or do you need really quality content where you keep users engaged? One of the things that these social networks also enable individual users to do is that once you're a fan or a follower, you can very easily unfollow or not look at someone's post. So creating relevant content that's useful to people is important about keeping tied in with people who are following you in these channels. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about online reviews. This is another one that is a hot topic and has become increasingly important with some of the moves that Google has made in the past year. So online reviews cover Google plus local, they cover Yelp. Some of the portals have started to incorporate reviews as well, such as Cars.com and Edmunds. This also includes testimonials that you may have on your website, as well as testimonials that you can also include on your Facebook page. You can even post them on Twitter. We recently did a consumer survey for people that were in the buying process, going to buy a car within the next 6 months. And we know that 90% of those people are going online to do research for cars. One of the interesting that we found through our survey is that over 75% of those people are specifically going to online review sites to look at dealerships before deciding which ones to go to. So this, I think, has become increasingly important and very relevant to dealers to pay attention to this and to make it a priority. The priority here is that you want to have a better score than your competition. And some of the ways that you measure that are you can look at your overall rank, so the number score. For Google plus local, that's out of a 30 scale. For Yelp, it's out of 5 stars, and so on and so forth. Another metric here to look at is the number of reviews. So that's relevant in one case because for Google plus local, if you don't have 10 reviews, you won't be ranked or scored. For others, if you have a dealership that, say, has 75 reviews and another dealership that has 10, the one that has 75 is going to seem, those reviews are going to seem more relevant, but two, you're going to feel like those users are more engaged and in touch with the dealership. And that's definitely something that consumers are saying. A third thing to look at is recency. So if you only have one review in the past 6 months, that's not something that is going to look good in a consumer's eyes because it doesn't seem like you're engaged with your user base either. So keeping up with reviews, making sure you have a constant flow of reviews on different sites is very important. There are a lot of changes that go on with online review sites, which does make this challenging. And if you have a vendor in this space, I would definitely rely on them. We have customers that we work on here, and this is something that you definitely want to leverage experts in the industry to make sure you're up on all the changes. One example is that Apple has just come out with their new iPhone and their new OS, and they've integrated Apple Maps. Apple Maps will now have Yelp reviews integrated in. So while Google Plus is super, super important when you look at how Google has integrated their reviews into their search results, the way Apple is integrating Yelp reviews into their maps is increasing the importance of Yelp too. So definitely be aware of all of those things. So next, we are going to look at content. So SEO, search engine optimization, has always been a huge topic. This is an area that I'm sure all of you are investing in, probably either through your website provider or through your marketing agency. And it's something that, as you know, it's longer term. So if you decide that you want to rank higher for specific keywords in SEO, and you make changes to affect that, those changes aren't going to take effect for maybe 90 days. But this is also something that you have to continually invest in. And one of the ways that you invest in SEO is through content. Google is continually making changes to their algorithm, and content and unique content and also content being posted on a regular basis is becoming increasingly important to how sites are ranked and ranked higher in their organic search results. So you can provide useful content through videos. YouTube, hugely popular. You can also, video content is just very engaging for users. We, as consumers, we like images, we like videos, we like something interactive. And also, the internet can dissociate people, so it almost seems like we're just bits and bytes, but video and images, they can help you create that personal connection with your customers, which is really important. Blog content, probably a lot of you through your website providers have an area so that you can have a blog on your site. And blog is great, but you probably also don't have a couple hours a week to sit there and write blog content. So this is something where you can utilize your agencies or your website providers or other people to help provide that unique content for you so that it is fresh, it is relevant to your user base. And that's the type of thing that as someone is doing research, say through Google, if you have a great article about, cost-effective vehicles, gas-efficient vehicles, new safety features, or just interesting content, those are the types of things that as they pop up when people are doing research, those are the things that they'll go to your site to read, and then they're already on your site. It makes it super easy for them to shop for cars. So all of those things, again, it takes some time, but it's well worth it, and all of those things are, go back to how are you ranking, how are you ranking compared to your competition, what kind of viewership are you getting on your videos, and all of those sorts of things. Next, we're going to just touch on a couple of new things. So one of the things that I'll talk about with some of my customers is, the hot new thing that's on the market. And, we've seen in the past year things like Instagram and Pinterest have really become hot for consumers, and I think businesses, including auto dealers, are all trying to figure out how do we take advantage of these new mediums that people are interacting with. Foursquare has been around for a while, but I think Foursquare is trying to become a lot more relevant for local businesses, so they're also becoming a hot topic. I think they're pitching businesses a lot and getting involved. One of the things that I'll say about New Social, again, these are more about branding and about becoming relevant for your target market. You have to look at what demographics are using those tools, and does that demographic align with your demographic. Also, what is the engagement model? Instagram, Pinterest, they're all visual based. So if you can basically come up with compelling content that's visually engaging, that can enable your dealership to have a good share of voice and all that kind of stuff, that's great. I would also just temper that with make sure your investment is appropriate for the return. These are new. It's not yet to be determined how these are going to necessarily impact long-term sales, but they're also fun and engaging and exciting for users. The other thing that I'll say about this is things like Foursquare are also geographically different. So I lived in New York City for a little bit. Foursquare is very hot there. People check in all the time. Users are very engaged. I'm now in North Carolina. People aren't as engaged with Foursquare. So depending on where your dealership is, that may also impact your decision to invest in some of these programs or not. And again, just balance your presence with the level of investment and see what other people in your area, auto dealers as well as other businesses, are doing. And that'll give you sort of a gauge on just how easy it will be for you to get users engaged. So next I'm going to change gears and move towards talking about direct response programs. So these, as I said at the beginning, are a little bit easier to measure because what we're talking about doing is measuring how is what I'm spending directly driving sales. So first, we're going to go back to local advertising here, and I'm going to talk about it in context with direct response. So in your TV commercials, radio commercials, in your local online ads on your website, you can actually put your promotions, you can put your pricing, you can even put certain incentives there that are trying to drive users to select you over someone else. This is where your key points of differentiation as well as your pricing and promotion really come into play. So what do you measure to see if this is really working? One, you can measure your number of in-showroom appointments that are related to different events or related to different promotions that you promoted on TV, radio, or online. The online side is a lot easier to measure because you can literally measure the clicks to your website from your local online advertising and ultimately drive through to measure how many leads you're getting from that local advertising channel. So one of the things that I will also talk about here is that when you look at direct response programs, traffic is important, but traffic converting to leads, converting to sales is more important. And being able to tie that through is sometimes difficult, but there are ways of doing it. So because if you get a lot of bad traffic that doesn't convert, all you're doing is probably wasting your salespeople's time, which is not something you want to do. You want them spending the time on the people who are most likely to buy, and those are the people that you want to drive into your showroom. So for local advertising, that's what you're looking to do. Next, I'm going to talk about search engine marketing. So this is paid advertising with a search engine such as Bing and Google. So this is something that you're likely doing through an agency, and how you measure it is through the click-through rate. Now, one of the things when you look at your search engine marketing strategy is you want to look at what is going to drive the highest value sales for you. So if you have a particular vehicle that you're looking to push, something you either have a lot of or something that gives you, or maybe you get, better profit margin on your used vehicles or a certain type of model, those are the keywords that you want to rank highly on. One of the things that I would encourage you to do is to work with your agency to dig a little deeper into this. Because as you look to rank high, you're going to get more click-through rate the higher you are on the page, right? But you also need to look at how many searches are being done for those keywords. Sometimes I've seen people come back and they're like, hey, I'm like #1 on all my keywords, but if you're #1 on keywords that get very few searches, that's not going to impact overall traffic to your website. So you may need to do some tests with your agency and look at the different types of keywords that you're selecting and really try and target keywords that get a lot of searches. Now you're going to have to pay more for those, but it may be better to pay more for those that are getting more searches and to balance that out with other things that you're doing to then carry those through to convert them to leads on your site. The other great thing about investing in SEM is that when you invest in search engine marketing, you are driving people directly to your website. So therefore, you drive them directly to your site and that you can have a much longer conversation with them there. You can offer them a lot more information about the vehicles, about your dealership, about any promotions you have, so that's great. The other thing that you can do is the way analytics work on both Google, Bing, and probably the analytics that your agency is providing you, is you can not only see your overall click-through rate, but you can also see your click-through rate per keyword, and you can also see if those keywords are converting to leads. So you can turn things on and off based on what's effective. And it does take a little bit of time to walk through that with your agency, but your agency should be able to get to that level of detail and highly optimize these things for you. So next, we're going to talk about your website. So when you look at driving traffic to your website, there's a lot of different ways that you drive traffic. You drive it through your local advertising, you drive it through those auto portals, you drive it through SEM. Ultimately, what you're trying to do is you're trying to capture leads and sales from your website and drive a positive ROI because you're spending a lot of money on your website. You're spending money on traffic to drive to your website, and you want to convert as many users as possible. Your key metrics here are simple. You want to understand your traffic, your leads from your website, and ultimately your sales. Your conversion from your website, number of sales to number of leads, is probably higher on your website than any other third-party internet provider. And one of the reasons is because you have the ability to influence those users in a much more direct way when they're actually on your website. One of the reasons to think about that is that whatever you can do to convert more visitors on your websites to leads is a very sound return on investment for you because you already have people there, you're having a conversation, being able to basically get them over the hump is hugely important. So if you think about it, your conversion on your website to leads is probably less than 5%. if you can, so if you have a 2% conversion rate and you increase that to a 3% conversion rate, that can have a huge impact on just your monthly sales. Because what that converts to is that converts to 10 additional car sales, 20 additional car sales from just raising your conversion 1 percentage point. So again, website hugely important. Look at your traffic, look at your leads, look at your sales, and look at how each channel is doing so you can optimize that over time. And then look to increase, use different methods, whether it's sliders, whether it's a lot of you are using chat, other things like that, to basically increase conversion on your site. Next, we're going to talk about just third-party lead providers and online advertising. So I'm sure all of you are using a combination of your website and third-party lead providers and other types of advertising to basically drive your internet sales. So as far as measuring these different things, what I do, most of the CRM providers will provide this to you, is you can get an internet report or an internet performance report where you can look at things by source. So when you look at things by source, you should be able to see each provider. You should be able to see how many leads they're driving to you, how many in-showroom appointments that's driving to you, and ultimately how many sales. Again, probably your highest converting channel is going to be your website, and then beyond that, you can look at these other third-party providers and figure out what's working and what's not. Now, if one of these providers has a lower percentage, that gives you an opportunity to go talk to that provider too and maybe work with them in figuring out, okay, how can I increase my conversion percentage? Are there things that I can do to have my vehicles presented better, provide more information, whatever it might be, so that you can actually increase that percentage. Overall, you want to get the best conversion percentage out of your internet marketing, and elements of your website as well as these third-party providers are really key. So it's very simple. It's the number of sales divided by your number of leads, and then evaluating each third-party provider that way. Finally, I'm just going to touch on listing services such as eBay and Craigslist. So what you're trying to drive here with eBay and Craigslist and other listing services like this is you're trying to drive those direct sales. eBay and Craigslist provide you flexibility to basically promote things within the listing as far as what is your headline, how are you doing things there, as well as ways to vary your landing pages as far as the photos you're using, your description, various things like that. You can look at how changing those elements can actually impact your metrics. So let's say you add more photos, or you add a video, or you change the way you do a headline. That may impact you to get more leads. And so if you're looking at these metrics that I have listed here below as far as the number of leads per car posted, the number of sales per number of leads, those are the things that as you make those modifications, you can actually see those reflected in the metrics, and you should very quickly be able to see what's working and what's not. Again, probably with these things, you would probably see an impact within, say, a week or two. And so you can quickly iterate through trying to optimize these sorts of things. And ultimately, for these guys, it's going to be, what's your return on investment in each of these channels as far as what are you spending on them versus how much money you're making on the back end. Now, in conclusion, let me just kind of review sort of the big takeaways here. So one, if you can't measure it, you can't understand if something is effective. And ultimately, you are sitting there at the end of the month. You spend a lot of money on marketing. You're looking at your sales. You want to understanding what's impacting it. So breaking it down, measuring it is going to help you understand what's working and help you understand what to focus on so that you can tweak it so that it works better for you and drives more sales. In order to do that, you do have to break down your programs and understand what the goals are. Is this a branding program? Is this a direct response? If I spend money here, do I expect results in 30 days or do I expect results in 90 days? Very important for understanding what's working. Third, you have to do this within the context of your competition. You have to understand what the guy down the road is doing so that you can understand how all of the users, how Harry, who's impacted by everything coming at him, how is he going to react based on what other people are doing and what you are doing. And that's how you're going to create a cohesive program that will give you a positive return on investment and get the customers coming into your front door. ultimately, this enables you to measure it. It also enables you to optimize and improve it over time for your offline marketing as well as for your online marketing. So that is the conclusion of my presentation. So I guess we have some questions that we will go into next.
Thank you very much, Vicki, for a great presentation. And I want to remind everybody not to miss Vicki's session at the 13th Digital Dealer Conference and Exposition. Her session will be held October 24th at 3:30 p.m. And it's about Stop Drowning in Data, the metrics that matter. You'll learn how to get more performance out of your existing marketing tools by monitoring the right metrics and learning how to impact those metrics to drive more sales. Okay, Vicki, we have some questions here, and the first one is from Ray. He says, what are your thoughts about paid advertising on social media sources like Facebook, Yelp, and Kudzu?
Okay, so that's a good question, and we didn't touch on that in here, so I'm glad that he brought that up. So one, I would say, if you're looking to do paid advertising on, say, Facebook, understand that the goal for that is to get probably fans for Facebook. And so again, that is a branding program. So I think you have to look at that from a budgetary standpoint as far as like how important is Facebook and that as an influencer to your overall target market. We've run some Facebook campaigns for some of our dealership customers to get additional fans around contests and stuff like that. One of the things that I've seen work is that Facebook advertising works when there's a specific incentive for users. So is there a contest that they can win a prize for? When you look at just some general branding and stuff like that, it's a little bit fuzzier. You can get your brand in front of customers, but the way that Facebook has integrated their advertising right now is it's not very noticeable. You're only paying for clicks, but it's just kind of a balance. What I've done with each of the Facebook ad campaigns that we've done is I've set a particular budget that we're going to spend, and we're going to get a certain number of clicks leading to fans. We evaluate whether that's worked for us or not, and then that's what we've done is we've done this then in basically limited campaigns over a specific period of time associated with an event, and that's where we found things to be most effective.
Thanks, Vicki. Our next question is from Sherry. She asks, we are a single-point Mitsubishi dealer in a large, expensive metro area. With less than 2% of the market share, how would you allocate your advertising budget?
So I would say, one, I would look at who are you directly competing against for your Mitsubishi cars. There's probably some other OEM brands that you're competing against. You're probably also competing against used. So if you have a very low market share, I would think that you would need to more heavily invest initially in some branding and then weave into there some direct response. For your branding, I mean, the biggest bang for your buck if you're really trying to increase that market share and share of voice for just pure awareness is TV and radio is still the way to go because you get the broadest base. But depending on what your marketing budget is, that may or may not be possible because it's also very expensive. So the other option that I would go to is I would look at your local advertising and combine that with a lot of focus on search engine marketing. Look at specific buying your Mitsubishi keywords, but also if you understand what your customers are also shopping for or shopping against, looking to related search terms and investing there. One of the reasons I say that is because you can cost effectively spend money and also see the impact very quickly so you can make adjustments.
Okay, thank you, Vicki. We have a question from Carol, and she asks, how do you know that showroom appointments are related to TV, online, or radio?
So it's hard. That's not an exact science, but there's a couple different ways. One, you can always ask customers. They may or may not tell you. They also may or may not know, to be honest. They may have heard it a couple different ways and may not exactly know. One of the things that you can usually look at, though, is if a customer comes in and they're inquiring about a specific promotion that you know was heavily promoted on TV or radio, that's probably a clear indication that they looked there. Another indication is if you can get your salesperson just to talk to the person about how they found you or whatever, you can probably find some of that. Some are going to more heavily focus on internet research, so things like Google searches and how you're ranking there is going to rank equally as much as dealership. But to some degree, it's a little loose. But what I would do is I would look at the promotions that you're promoting via TV and radio and look at, are those things that people are inquiring about as they're coming in.
Thanks, Vicki. Here's a question from Dan. How do you measure effectiveness of SEO and other long-term branding advertising initiatives?
So the hard and fast way to do that is to actually do a branding study. So agencies can do this as well as other marketing research agencies. And it's something that, if it's something that you're willing to invest in, is something that you could do, say, twice a year or even once a year, just to see how they're doing. If you want to really be on top of it, you could do it once a quarter. And what this is what happens during these research studies is you will actually have a third-party research firm that will go out into your target market, to your target demographic, and they will do surveys. They will do surveys sometimes direct, sometimes online. What they will ask in that survey is a number of different questions. So it won't be just auto-focused, it would be a variety of vendor-focused, but they would ask some questions that relate to brand recall, what's both aided and unaided. And you can do that around particular campaigns. So if you had a big campaign around a big event and you want to know how effective your TV and radio advertising was, you could actually do one of these research studies right afterwards, and you would do one before and you would do one afterwards to see how your aided and unaided brand recall were different. That's one of the ways, from just general branding as far as TV and radio. When you look at SEO, this is something where if you have an SEO provider, whether it's your website provider or an agency or a boutique or something like that, I would have them do, before they start any big work for you, have them do a baseline study that looks at, here are the 20 keywords that we are focused on, winning as far as SEO and highly ranking for. Have them do a baseline, before they start their work as far as where you rank for those keywords and where your competition ranks. Then what I would do is have them do that same study 60, 120 days after so that you can see where you've been able to move the needle with those particular keywords. One of the things to remember with both SEO as well as SEM is you have to specifically measure how you're doing for specific keywords. So if someone's just doing, I hear a lot of times people say, quote, someone's doing SEO for me. And my question is, well, what are they, what keywords are they focused on? And that's very important for you to understand to make sure, one, they're the right keywords, two, they're focused the right way based on, your competition and who's out there, and your goals around just promotions and what you're trying to do. But also, it's very much, if you don't know what you're focused on, you're never going to get there. But I would, for those keywords that you're focused on, have them do a baseline, and then as they're doing their work, have them repeat the study on a regular basis so you can see how you're moving.
Thanks, Vicki. We have another question here. Do you believe Edmunds.com is a major provider or a waste of money? I had dropped them recently, but I think it may just be an issue of sourcing. What do you think?
So I think all of the major auto portals, Edmunds, Cars.com, Auto Trader, I think they both have a niche. They're both, you have to look at the fact that they're all marketing themselves to customers. And I think they all have slightly different ways that they're focused. Edmunds, for a long time, they were focused a lot on, they have a huge section related to just dealers so that you can easily find a dealer in your area. Whereas, Auto Trader was looking at a lot of, used car areas. They've all kind of molded together so they're both doing new and used cars. And so I think it may be a matter of, one, looking at what you're focused on, new versus used, to figure out what's the best placement for you. Secondly, I think it's also a matter of looking at who, from a competitive perspective, who else is there. So if you have, 3 other people there who are premium sponsors, that sell your same brand in your same area, maybe that's And what I would do if it were me, I would test it. I would see how much traffic I get. I would see how much, does that move the needle at all over a period of time or not, and have a set time set on it, whether it's 90 days. And then if it works, great. If it doesn't, then you'll know. But again, around understanding what your expectations are out of it, and then looking at it over an appropriate time frame, you're able to test and see if it can be effective for you.
Thanks, Vicki. We have another question from Ray. He says, a lot of dealers do not realize that social media is a full-time, almost 24/7 job. Do you agree?
So, I mean, social is on 24/7 for sure. I think there are some ways to manage it more efficiently so that you don't have to, I don't think you necessarily have to have someone in your dealership who's looking at Facebook all the time, making sure that nothing's going on. There are monitoring services out there. There are services that can do that for you. But in order to be relevant within social, you do have to be consistent. Now, does that mean posting to Facebook 5 times a day? My opinion is no. Does it mean posting to Facebook, 3 to 5 times a week? Probably. Twitter, maybe it's an everyday thing. If something's relevant, maybe more than once a day. I think the other thing that's key about social, depending on, again, your level of investment in it, which relates to your demographic. So if you are targeting a younger demographic that's very Twitter savvy, I think you can actually leverage social search to drive your business. If you do social search and you're looking for people who are talking about your OEM brand or talking about purchasing a car, and you can develop relationships, that's a way to also leverage social in a different way to actually drive a little bit more direct, but that does take a lot of time. When you're looking to just have a branding presence, I think you can do it cost effectively, and I think you can do it time effectively so that it doesn't necessarily have to be a 24/7 job, but you also can't go to sleep at the wheel, so that if someone does post to your Facebook or say something to you on Twitter or say something about you on Twitter, that you're aware of it and that you can respond in a timely manner.
Thanks, Vicki. Well, I guess we've answered all the questions that our attendees have submitted. And I'd like to thank everybody for attending, and thank you, Vicki, for giving a great presentation. We'd like to ask everyone to complete a short survey that will be delivered to you after you exit the webinar. And if you have any additional questions or you would like a hard copy or recording of today's presentation, please email our host, Maria Burkell, at mburkell@dealer-communications.com. And please stay tuned for upcoming Digital Dealer webinars. Our next webinar will be held Thursday, October 4th, and it will be You Had Me at Hello, So Why Didn't I Show? Converting Leads into Appointments That Show and Buy. Our speaker will be Dr. John Milarnik, the founder and CEO of PCS Global. The webinar is free, and we hope you'll sign up for it at www.ddwebinars.com. I'd also like to remind you to come and join us October 23rd to the 25th at the Mirage Hotel in Las Vegas, Nevada for the 13th Digital Dealer Conference and Exposition. Don't forget, Vicki's going to be speaking at that too. Dealership registration is open, and you can register by going to www.digitaldealerconference.com. Again, Vicki, thanks for a great presentation, and thanks everyone for attending.
Thank you. This concludes our webinar. Have a great day.